Brand strategy, brand standards, brand positioning, brand voice, brand. When we strip away all of the ancillaries, the core of branding is demarking an animal with a hot iron. But what does that mean for marketers as we try to build organizations that understand, respect, and perpetuate our carefully orchestrated branding? After all, branding can be impacted by anyone outside the company and everyone within it. Marketing and sales are full of myths, misconceptions, and sometimes flat out lies. Join us as we rebrand the echo chamber and try to reframe it as positive.
Hello and welcome to the Rethink Marketing Podcast, where we try two voices of reason in a sea of modern marketing chaos. I'm Paul Frodge, joined by Mr. Marketing, and for today's conversation, the blacksmith of bettering, branding, babblizing, Colin Jeffries. That was definitely a tongue twister.
I love that you brought in blacksmith there, Paul, because historically, blacksmiths were the one developing the brands. So I think the brands that would be used on cattle. So I think that's really appropriate and moderately humorous, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Looking forward to figuring out the noun versus the verb here on this conversation.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly what we're rethinking today, Paul. Brands are complex and require a lot of intentionality and being deliberate. But because a large part of that is people, the act of branding really never stops. It's a perpetual activity. Hence, when we say the brand, usually we're looking at that as a noun. But in reality, we should be saying the branding, so to speak, which is a verb. So I think just a nerdy reminder here that brand is a noun and branding is a verb. And I would bet that anybody who's ever wrestled a cow to the ground to burn a mark into its skin with a hot iron would probably tell you that branding is a very difficult process, especially for the cow.
Absolutely, Colin. Interesting how we're going to bring this all back, this circle back from the cow to actually how we're going to market our products and services.
Absolutely. I would say when most marketers think about branding, maybe we don't think about people management, but in reality, that's where branding starts. We have to manage customers, which are people. We have to manage employees, which are people. We have to manage vendors, which are people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So our strategy it has to include the sort of messiness and unpredictability of humans if we want to have an effective brand strategy.
Sure, that all definitely makes sense. And looking at trying to figure out how the brand and the branding really are impacted with the people and all these different touch points, from customer experience to understanding the audience to the consistent brand messaging. Really, that whole storytelling about how the emotional touch points and how brands actually get people to really be emotive in their conversation to their actual audience.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I think about, let's pick a company that has 500 employees. That's 500 people that are actively branding your organization, whether they know it or not. So when they're at a barbecue and somebody says, "Hey, Tom, you work at XYZ company," and Tom's like, "Oh my gosh, my boss sucks. The benefits are terrible. The pay's low." That's branding. Conversely, when somebody calls in and they say, "Hey, I got your product and it was deficient in this way," their experience with your customer service department, and sometimes customer service departments are outsourced, but that experience reflects on your brand. And so when we're thinking about branding, there are so many things, to your point, Paul, that marketing just can't control. Marketing generally, as a department, has pretty little purview over who we hire, how we hire them, how we train them, what their orientation process looks like, how they're being checked in on, so to speak, how merit increases are determined based on performance, like what are the factors that go into that. A lot of this is very human resources specific. So when we're thinking about branding, it's paramount that the leaders of our human resources team understand and buy into the fact that the humans that make up our organization are actively branding for us. And I'll take this a step farther and say that when somebody looks at an invoice and they say, "Oh, we owe XYZ company money," what's their perception? Is that positive or negative? Or we just send an invoice to XYZ company. They always pay late. They short pay us sometimes. They're pains to deal with. That's branding. So when we're thinking about vendors, when we're thinking about clients, when we're thinking about the whole spectrum of engagement across the entire supply chain is probably not even the right way to say that, but across from, the supply chain through who we're working with, and then obviously through our clients, there's a lot of messiness around branding, and that all has to be managed.
It's interesting you talk about when people call in, the call centers, and us as marketers can write the script and talk about how to answer the calls and how to, work with, some challenges and what the response should be and social media or comments there. But it's interesting, every time I call in, let's say for a credit card company or for a service that I have personally, and what always comes on, this call is being recorded for quality assurance purposes, but it's who is doing the quality assurance? Because gosh darn it, every time I call that same company, I feel like I'm getting the same bad experience in a lot of cases. So interesting how us as marketers can really impact that from a call center for sure.
Yes, that's true. I mean, call center, I think of retail heavy businesses, the showroom, the front of the building. Now we're talking about working with our landlord or our landscaper or what have you to make sure that the perception of the building is one that reflects the brand that we're trying to convey. And again, usually marketing is not having conversations with a landlord or with the landscaping company or with the organization that's coming in and shoveling the parking lot during snowstorms. But those all impact how people perceive our brand. So, Paul, as somebody who leads an organization that's very cognizant of your brand, how do you manage your people in a way or lead your people in a way where they recognize the importance of how they speak about the company, how they post on social media about the company, when they're wearing branded apparel and when they're not, those types of things?
Yeah, I think that it can definitely be a challenge as the leader of an organization trying to coach and to manage all of this. And lucky for me, I have a strong leadership team in place as well that's helping out with a lot of those efforts. But it is interesting as a Zoom call, for instance. When you're on a Zoom call and it's the RBF, of one of your somebody on your team, and it's like, how do you chat with them in a polite manner to say smile, right? So it's a joke around our office, and we're a little lax more than corporations are, to where we can all joke about it and have fun with it, and just some subtle reminders in some instances to those that are maybe less cognizant of those situations. But yeah, it's a matter of talking about it for sure. The communication aspect internally, to be able to make sure that we're all going to market in a similar fashion with, everybody's got their own personality and the way that they come off as a person dealing with clients or out there with their friends in society. But I encourage personality. I encourage everybody to have their own uniqueness. But at the same time, it all comes back to what we want to accomplish as an organization from a branding standpoint.
That's a great point. I love that you called out communication, because the best of intentions will die if we don't have the best of communications. And so thinking about how marketing is communicating the importance of brand to human resources, to the facilities maintenance team, to whoever that is, to make sure that when we're recruiting, hiring, onboarding, continuing to check in, when we're talking about the physical respects of our building, the monument sign and the showroom and things of that nature, the lobby, for example, that those are all aligned with what we want our brand perception to be. So excellent points there, Paul. So I guess that leads us into maybe the final bullet point, which is, does branding ever stop?
I don't think so, personally. There's ongoing efforts. You have new employees that are learning the company from the ground up, new target customers that are coming into play that have never heard of you or maybe have experienced you in a different light in the past as a company or an organization. So I don't think branding ever stops. And it goes all the way back to what you started this conversation with. It's people. There's people everywhere and different constituents and that you're really having to market to, or either internally or externally, for sure.
Absolutely. And that intentional communication to lead and sort of manage, or in some cases, contain those people and their perceptions and how they're continuing to impact the general perception of our brand in the marketplace is absolutely paramount.
So, Colin, a question for you is, in healthcare, because that's the industry that you're in, and looking at different healthcare organizations that are out there. There's some that are brand new to the marketplace, startups, but there's also well-established health systems out there as well. Talk about your experience with brand versus branding in the healthcare space.
Absolutely. I like to start with the very end of the patient experience, which is when they pay their bill. Right before they pay their bill, they get the bill in the mail. Usually before that, they get the explanation of benefits and things of that nature, right? But they pick the phone up or they log into the portal to pay their bill. What is that experience like? Because typically, bill paying is the most painful part of healthcare, and it's also the most confusing. I have a high deductible HSA, or I have a flexible spending account. What do I owe versus the insurance? And understanding your EOB and those sorts of things can be really challenging. So that is, I think, the pinnacle of branding for healthcare organizations, and it's usually overlooked. Now we back up a little bit. The bill comes in the mail, they go on to pay it. That we need to make sure that is well branded. And I mean that in the sense not that it comes on letterhead with a logo, but more so that when they're talking to somebody on the phone, they understand how they owe what they owe and why and all that stuff. They understand payment terms, they understand discounts, et cetera. Or they're logging into the patient portal and it's user friendly and it's really simple for them to go and understand what they're paying and why. We back that up to if there's an operation or a particular medication that they're taking that hopefully they've recovered and they're feeling better. Is someone checking in on them? Did their primary care doctor, did their nurse practitioner, did their APRN, whoever they saw, their physical therapist maybe, did that person follow up with them and say, hey, are you feeling better? Are you getting better? Have the gains that we've seen been maintained? Almost no healthcare organizations do that. Many healthcare organizations are sending a text that's saying, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how was your experience with us? How likely would you be to recommend us? But some organizations don't even go that far. And that's branding, because a patient goes in, they see a provider, they hopefully have some sort of modality, a medication, physical therapy, like I said, or talk therapy or what have you, right? They go in to get better. Hopefully they get better. And before that happens, they're talking to a provider, they're talking to a doctor, maybe they're researching online before they do that, maybe they're talking to their friends. So on the front end of that, we have general community perception of the healthcare organization. Are the doctors kind? Do they listen to you? And I say doctors in a general sense. Are the providers kind? Do they listen to you? Do you actually get better when you go there, right? Can they actually help you? So there's a ton that goes into what I would consider intentionality that is branding that marketing has zero purview over. Almost no marketing departments are looking at, hey, how do we manage NPS or customer satisfaction scores in a way that feels like we care about the patient? Because that's branding. How are we managing the bill paying process in a way that feels like we are empathetic and we understand that, hey, you just went through this experience trying to get better. Did you get better? And do you feel like we provided really good value for the price that we're asking you to pay? And then obviously, like once that person then goes and swims off into the ether, what are they saying about their experience? So my general experience, Paul, is that healthcare organizations can be really bad at that. And that's why healthcare organizations that are good at branding, and I mean that again in the holistic sense, their call center teams answer the phone courteously and kind and enthusiastic. They're able to spend time walking people through the process. The providers spend good time with patients and they understand what their needs are and they have high empathy and they understand vocalics and those sorts of things that can be engaging all the way through the bill pay process. Hopefully that wasn't too long of an answer.
No, that's great. And a lot of things that you talked about were current customers. So that branding continues all the way through being a current customer and their experience as they are a customer or a client or whatever you want to say, depending on the industry. And let's talk about a little bit about the branding of somebody that's never been a client or a customer before. and how to go to market with that branding and the experience when you haven't experienced it yet. What are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. Alan Dibb has a great quote that says, "Great marketing beats great products," and that's absolutely true because perception is reality before somebody has tried your product. I think in Google they call it the zero moment of truth, which is when somebody first encounters your brand, not your product, not your service, but your brand. Right? Well, what is the perception there? Is it something where I am injured or I'm sick and I've heard of this hospital that their billing practices are just absolutely terrible? I've heard that this practice, the pharmacist will scrimp on dose and I don't get the full dose of what I need, or you fill in the blank, right? There could be any number of things. So that's when managing perception is key. And that can be done through traditional media, radio spots, TV spots, can be done through social media. But really, when it comes down to is word of mouth and how we're being intentional and deliberate about what we expect people to say about us. And I say we, meaning the entire organization, not just the marketing team. Because if the call center, the front desk, the providers, the support teams, if they don't understand what we're trying to get people to say about us, they're just not going to say it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about healthcare and our family for an instance, there's certain healthcare providers that every one of our family members has seen, and everybody has a different experience depending on what's going on with them, right? And the first time you have a good experience, but maybe another family member goes to that same healthcare provider and has a terrible experience, that quickly the brand there starts to suffer. And the next time you start questioning whether or not you want to go back to that same company, right? And then there's opportunities for other, we're speaking of healthcare right now, but this could apply to any business, thinking about switching to something else, right? So, and then how do other brands in the marketplace that might be competition stack up and win that business if somebody is in that really zero moment of truth or making decisions of where to go
That's
next?
absolutely right, Paul. Yeah, brand erosion is real and it comes from customer perceptions and customer experience. What do you think brands do from I'll call it a branding defense perspective to prevent that brand erosion from people having bad experiences? And I recognize you can't control 100% of product quality or service quality, but I think there are some things we can do. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of the things that customers of ours, clients of ours do and have done with our recommendation over the years is going to market with testimonials. And that can be challenging in its own right, but having somebody that really had an experience and it wasn't just a paid actor, and that can be something if somebody else is having a similar challenge to say, it's almost like a case study. And looking at the opportunity to say, okay, this is the experience I had, and I recommend going there as well. We've done it with endorsement radio before. We've done it with real people, not actors, but real people, and that's been influential when you're meeting somebody where they're at, and they may be needing the service, of that provider or the service of that particular company.
That's a great point. I've seen some brands do that really well with what I would consider our alumni videos, meaning employees that worked there for some duration of time and then left and went elsewhere. And then they talk in a positive sense about what they were able to get out of and give to that organization. And those types of videos, to your point, can go a long way in making sure that we're recruiting the right talent, we're training them the right way, and they're sort of singing off the same sheet of music that we want them to.
Sure. And we've talked in past episodes as well about influencer marketing, and that can be have a lasting impact for somebody to make a decision. And strongly believe in that is the opportunity for now and into the future to sway people's decision and really have them think about certain businesses where they wouldn't have before. So definitely an opportunity to gain market share by having somebody that they listen to and trust to influence that decision making.
Yes, absolutely. Influencer marketing has come a long way and it's really impacting brand perception now for sure. Well, Paul, this has been a fun conversation talking about the fact that brand may be perceived as a noun, but branding is definitely a verb and one that is ongoing. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today and for listening to the Rethink Marketing Podcast. Until next week, keep rethinking those common assumptions and keep rethinking your use of the word brand. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If people want to connect with us, where should they go, Paul?
RethinkMarketingPodcast.com, Colin. What can listeners do to help us in return for the sage marketing wisdom and our pithy humor?
They can help us by leaving a review on their favorite platform or sharing this episode with a fellow marketer to help them cut through the clutter.
Well, until next time, keep rethinking those common assumptions.